Every time he dances, it's just awful.
Why are you so negative? I thought we were.
Welcome to the Demand Better podcast, where we are your consumer guide to all things in the health and fitness space. My name's Corona, and I'm in the concrete jungle of New York City. And as always, I am joined by Dr. Bo in Superior, Colorado. Today's topic is Demand Better from Pseudoscience. But before we get into it, what's up, Bo?
Not too much, my friend. Thank you for the intro, and I'm just excited to keep this going. This is our third chapter, our third episode, third week in a row. We're diving into this research concept, and joined here by our friend Faraz Javed.
That's the returning champion.
The returning champion.
It's returning champion, TV personality, WXYZ, reporter and anchor, Faraz Javed.
Thank you guys for that wonderful introduction, and a pleasure to be back again for episode 2, where I get featured in it.
That's one way to see the world. Only which episodes am I in?
Listen, we out there. How you doing today, Faraz?
Loving it. Loving it. It's a Friday, so it's always nice to get into that mindset. Saturday, Sunday, weekend kicking in. These are the days when you kind of like want to plan ahead. For me, it's about planning your fitness and also making sure we get the right nutrition in, because I know that's one of the topics for today.
The Faraz is always prepared. It's just a joy to be with him. Let's do a quick recap, guys. So last time from chapter 2, we just, from the recap we dealt with echo chambers, and if it bleeds, it leads. And how we get into those places, and that's how we make our decisions, as well as there's no nuanced conversations these days. Science changes, guys. And let's reestablish what an evidence-based research model is. It's a third research, it's a third clinician experience, as well as a third client expectation. With that, I'm going to have Bo revisit the triad and start this conversation.
So I think that takes us into just the overall limitations of research. And there's a reason this is a triad, because if research proved everything, then we wouldn't need the triad. We'd say, hey, like all the evidence says, glute training is going to fix all low back pain. And unfortunately, those are never, I wish they were. I've been looking for the magic pill. But same thing with diet. It's like keto is the answer to everything, and no, it never is. And people who make these claims, the confidence of it all drives me a little crazy. So if we could only rely on research, that'd be phenomenal. And just say, you know what, like I have to do ultrasound on you because ultrasound has been shown to work. Where the reality is, ultrasound is not supported by any evidence, basically at this point, but it's still used out there. And if you're in a clinic and they're doing a little ultrasound on you, be aware. I don't want to ruin the placebo effect of it all, but at the same time, the research says it doesn't actually do anything. So, hey, who are we to argue with the research? I'm going down rabbit holes. I'm going to throw it back to you.
Well, you were supposed to redefine this whole thing, my friend. So let's discuss the Dunning-Kruger effect with that lead-in that you just gave us, and people's certainty in their claims as they spout them to all of us in the general public.
Yeah. Faraz, are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
No, actually hit me with that.
Yeah. So this is a fun one that became much more popular and a big part of conversation in the last few years with Corona, with everybody being an expert on Facebook and your uncle telling us whatever he thinks about, and everybody's an expert, right? And now gas prices are up. And now everybody's an expert on how, international effects are going to trickle all the way down, and affairs are going to trickle all the way down to gas. So bottom line is, as somebody gains a little bit of knowledge, and you can see in the graph here at the beginning, you have a little bit of knowledge. That's when you're at your peak of confidence. And this is why we talk about one of our big takeaways when it comes to research is the more confident somebody is, the less likely they truly understand the issue at hand. So the more they're saying, oh, it's clear that, again, the war over in Ukraine is causing gas prices to go up and it's all Biden's fault or whatever. And I don't want to make this political by any means. And I already did that just by throwing certain names out. But again, you see the peak there. So as you get more educated and as you get more knowledge and get more cultured, as it shows in this graph, your actually confidence goes way down because you're like, wait a minute, there's like all these different aspects to research and to the complexity of whatever this issue is. And then you see the expert is actually significantly less confident than the ignorant person at the beginning. And we use the term ignorant, by the way, not to be derogatory. I've thrown that word at some people in the past, and people get very offended, which is okay. The term itself just simply means a lack of knowledge at the end of the day. So I'm ignorant about a lot of international affairs and how gas prices are affected by things like that.
So for us, how does this affect you in the news business in terms of what we see out there?
So Corona, this is actually interesting because, when we find experts to talk about a particular topic, and this is something I don't know if I'll overlap from what we did last week, is this is where our challenge lies, because once again, with that short time frame that we have to find an expert. And how do we basically pick the right expert? That becomes the right question, isn't it? Like that's the difficult part. So if you're showing confidence in what you're saying, that's always important in a person's personality. But does that confidence reflect ignorance, or does that confidence reflect knowledge? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Am I making sense over here? And so I think for the most part, we all kind of get blinded with that confidence. We're like, oh, if this person is confident about what he or she is talking about, this person definitely knows what they're talking about and they're knowledgeable. So it's interesting to see this graph and to see that the expert is actually not as confident as the ignorant person.
No, it's truly, truly, truly interesting. And it kind of rolls us with all this background that we just talked about. It rolls us into your favorite topic there for us, and that is game changers.
Before we go there, I did want to go through that, and I think that's my fault. We kind of went out of order, and we do have a live caller who's going to join us soon. So Scott, hang on there. We'll cue you in a little bit. I'm going to switch it over to these different types of research. And expert opinion, we notice, is on the bottom there. We have randomized control trials in the middle, and all the way at the top, systematic reviews. And you can see filtered information versus unfiltered information. And so again, if you've ever heard of the term peer-reviewed journals, that's something filtering requires that we're actually looking at what got done in the research in the lab and how that transferred over to what we're presenting of whatever that headline is, saying, again, red meat causes cancer. That's the one I'll always kind of keep picking on. That it's very misleading. So a couple things I want to run through real quick, if that's all right. So let's go through this whole concept. So again, expert opinion is what we get a lot of, including in the news, right? Again, you have Farris on the ABC affiliate. We need to bring in an expert on CrossFit, so they bring me on. Awesome. I might very well be somebody who's very well versed in all of the ins and outs of CrossFit. If we wanted to talk about the Cuban American experience, we might bring on Corona, and he could be an expert in that. But that's still the lowest form of evidence, and it has its place. But the reality of it is, again, it's the lowest form of evidence especially when we're talking about things that might be causing us to make decisions that we're going to change significant aspects of our lives, like switching to a plant-based diet, which we're going to dive into with Game Changers. Double-blind randomized control trial. I just want to define that really quickly. So double-blind refers to the fact that the researchers and the subjects actually are not aware of whether they're getting the placebo, which is the sugar pill, which it's not supposed to have any real effect, versus the medication or whatever the intervention is. So we're testing out, let's say Viagra, that's something everybody knows. So if we're testing that out, and again, we have, let's say 10 people, we give 5 of them actual Viagra and 5 of them, again, a sugar pill without any real medication in it. That is a randomized controlled trial, right? And then because we're going to monitor that. The double blind part is where there's a third party. So let's say Farris is now the third party who's saying, I know who gets the pill, the actual Viagra, and who doesn't get, and who gets the sugar pill. But the researcher, let's say I'm the researcher, I don't know who's getting what, but I'm responsible for monitoring their conditions. But I don't know that Corona got which pill he got. And I'm not saying Corona has any erectile dysfunction issues. I'm not putting that out there. But anyway, double-blind randomized control trial. We lost our friend Scott. He's going to come back, I assume, Faraz, if you want to touch base with him. And so double-blind randomized control trial, that's, again, a very high level of evidence. But even you see on this pyramid, it's in the middle. Systematic reviews, let's jump all the way to that, is where they're looking at a number of different studies, and they're actually putting them all together. And so they might take 100 different studies and say, what did all these studies find? What do we actually know about whatever the topic is? Again, how meat affects cancer. And so a couple things there is there's epidemiological and observational studies. So again, that's when you'll see 3,000 people were followed for 10 years. And that sounds really powerful. And they do the best they can to say, let's say I got my Brooklyn shirt on right now, and I'm going to pull this chart down just so we can talk a little more fun. But let's say I have a 3,000 people in Brooklyn, and we can follow them for 10 years. That's observational. And again, we're going to say, of those 3,000 people, 1,000 were vegan the whole time. 1,000 were eating the standard American diet, going to McDonald's and things like that. And then the other 1,000 were eating a paleo diet, let's just say. And then we follow them for 10 years and we see who did die, who had cancer, who had obesity, who had changes in their socioeconomic, all these different factors we could look at. At the end of the day, though, what's really powerful there is we have to do a lot as researchers to keep up with who actually stuck to those diets, where were they before, what does that really mean? Because again, when I keep picking on red meat causes cancer, the studies that showed that had McDonald's as red meat. And again, to me, I haven't eaten at McDonald's in a very, very long time, and something I'm very proud of. But at the end of the day, I just want to talk about the fact that, again, when you hear of these epidemiological and observational studies, and then they go to saying, hey, you should now be a plant-based person because this study showed this, there's a lot of gaps there. And nutritional science is very, very limited. The gold standard, real quick, before I see Corona wants to say something, is the metabolic ward study, which is where they would lock you in an actual hospital for a month. You're not necessarily limited, but they just need to be able to monitor every single thing you put into your body and everything that comes out of your body. And they're able to do that and then measure very clearly and distinctly exactly what the effects are. That is the gold standard. It is not very realistic. And we don't get a lot of that. That's why, again, we get a lot of labs, mice and maybe monkeys and things like that, that we're getting studies with. So anyway, I'm done with my lecture. So
but that's a perfect takeaway, because that starts us off right in the right place for this conversation about game changers, which I know we all three of us has very, very strong opinions about. I'm going to let your voice chill for a second. And Faraz, let's go. Tell me what your thoughts are. Let's roll.
Corona, I just want to give you a fair warning. This is a very sensitive topic for Bo. The minute I bring up the title game changer, I've actually had maybe a couple of things thrown at me. So I'm glad we're doing this virtually, because Bo gets pretty, emotional about this topic. No, but one thing I do want to add to what Bo was saying earlier, and this is with staying in touch with the topic. So when we do these studies, when we do these research studies, I think what we do also need to consider is if humans are being used for these studies, what are they being done on a certain race, on a certain gender, on a certain age group? All these things matter. Now, for instance, I know Bo, he loves his vegetables, but he's never gonna go, at least as far as I know, as of today, he's not gonna go vegetarian 100%. And
I call myself a vegetarian who eats meat, A, and B.
Okay. Right, but we're talking about a dictionary meaning of being vegetarian.
Yes. And to this conversation, you're saying I will never do it. I want to double down on the fact that I will follow the science. And if I'm ever convinced by a litany of research that kicking meat out of my diet is a better thing for me, I will absolutely switch.
That's why I said as of today. As of right now.
I never will.
You're being very sensitive. Faraz, go ahead.
But Corona, I said that was a fair warning. I told you that was a fair warning. And I'm glad
I'm in a glass case of emotion.
Hey, you are off. Go ahead, Faraz.
So for example, now I understand some of his arguments when it comes to eating meat and whatnot. But let's take an example at South Asian culture. Now, South Asian culture, predominantly in India, they are heavily vegetarian eaters. They eat a lot of their vegetables. Most of the time, they don't even eat meat. Right now,
but hold on. Can we, for 1 second? Hold on.
Okay. Let him finish his point.
But no, I'm not saying all Indians or all South Asians are the healthiest bunch of them all. I'm certainly not saying that. But at the same time, the ailments that we see in South Asia is very different to the ailments that we see here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So I guess one thing that what I'm trying to highlight is that it depends from race to race, from gender to gender, from age group to age group. Also, another thing that I'm in agreement with Bo, because we were having this conversation earlier, is that I think the goal should always be eating healthy. And for example, now if you have been on a McDonald's diet for your entire life, or I don't want to trash McDonald's because I think some people think McDonald's is amazing, and that's a right to think that way. But let's just go with fast food for a second. If you're eating fast food for all your life, pizzas and burgers and God knows what, and then all of a sudden you cut down to eating vegetarian, I think by default, your life is going to transform. You're going to lose, your fat mass. You're going to lose a lot of unhealthy weight. That's going to go for sure, right? And I think that's the group that's going to see the most amount of benefits when it comes to eating vegan or vegetables predominantly, in their diet, and having that go through that transformation. And I think that's where, because I've been in the States for quite some time, not even now, but been before in 2003 when I came down to study here and whatnot. So I've seen the American diet. The American diet consists of a lot of,
ultra processed.
Let's go. I don't want to use the word crap, but high in fat and high in pretty much a lot of unhealthy things. And I think the one effective way to eliminate that, or the easiest way for a layman, is to go vegetarian, because chances of you eating crap with vegetarian is a little less than eating your traditional food, which is through meat products. And I think so when Game Changer was made, and when these individuals actually went vegetarian and went vegan, they cut down all those elements from their diet, and they saw that transformation. Their energy level boosted for sure. They lost a lot of weight. So to say that, it doesn't work, and I'm not saying that's exactly what Bo is saying, but there are people who counter that by saying, vegan and vegetarian diets don't work. I think that's wrong, because once again, it depends on who has transformed their life from what point. So, for example, if Bo was supposed to go vegan and vegetarian, Corona, I don't know what kind of diet you follow, but
no.
But I know what Bo eats, and the only reason because I've known Bo longer, and so if he was supposed to go to vegan or vegetarian diet, I don't think he'll see a lot of changes. He might see some fluctuations, maybe some better results.
I can tell you right now, I would lose a lot of muscle mass very quickly.
Yes.
Because it's just and this is something you were asking me about the other day.
Yeah.
Whereas is on that kind of diet, it's just very difficult. And this is what Game Changers gets into. And I want to jump in and again say what we're talking about here is defining a lot of terms. And what you're talking about too is these confounding variables. So, and we tend to attribute something like switching to exactly what you're talking about, switching to a plant-based diet. And let's use the term plant-based, because that's what Game Changers does. And again, plant-based is a very loose term, which again, I feel like they were being very manipulative about, because they talked about the guy who beat Conor McGregor in the MMA fight. I forgot his name right now, but he was plant-based, but they don't mention the fact that he's eating eggs and fish. So, but again, to whatever percent, if you're 51% plants and then 49% meat, go ahead.
But two things. They don't, first of all, on Faraz's first point, there was a movie made about people who eat McDonald's. It's called Super Size Me. And the guy
that was a person.
That was a person. No, but that was a person. And yes, I'm not valuing the whole McDonald's experience on one person, but we saw what happened to that person.
Well, and this is an interesting thing real quick, because there was a rebuttal documentary which did not get as much success. I don't remember the name of it right now, but the person was basically saying, yeah, you chose to eat like the worst possible way at McDonald's. He went to McDonald's and ordered the salad, and he got reasonable calories, and he stuck to that. And after 30 days, his health metabolic markers actually improved. So again, we're not here to celebrate or demonize, but I think the bigger picture that I just want to finish with is there's so many other variables and factors. And so again, when we start to go to plant-based is the ultimate thing or meat eating is the ultimate thing, we're losing, the nuance that we're talking about.
But you're going back. One second. We're going back to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Everybody's screaming from their place, and they're saying that they are right, and that they're absolutely right, and that's where we're kind of losing in the conversation. The Super Size Me movie was about one person. Game Changers was about a certain group of guys, and it's all deceiving when it all comes down to it. Faraz, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
And that's a great point, Corona, that you brought there. I'll also say when we were talking about what would happen to Bo when he went on a plant-based, or if he would ever go on a plant-based diet, his one thing is that he would lose a lot of muscle mass. Now, what people forget to realize is if they jump on a weighing scale, they're not going to see that weight they lost is through muscle or fat or or bone, whatever. They're just going to lose. They're going to look at that weighing scale. It's going to drop like 40 pounds less. They were like, "Whoa, this works." But have you actually lost unhealthy weight or healthy weight? That's the question. And I get a lot of that question. For example, oh man, I lost like 50 pounds, but I'm still flabby and this and that. Like that's because you probably lost a lot of your muscle mass. That's essentially what happened. And I think that's what people fail to realize is also another thing. I just a couple of weeks ago, I did a report on going plant-based. And so I was speaking to, so Michigan has one of the highest population for plant-based eaters, and most of them are African Americans, actually.
Really?
And yes, interestingly, isn't it? In fact, the first plant-based meat was patented right here in Michigan. Fun fact.
Patented? You mean patented?
Patented, sorry, right here in Michigan.
Is that a religious group? Is that like Seventh-day Adventist or something like that?
No. It's wait, what? I'm just so confused right.
Seventh-day Adventist is a religious group.
Yeah, no. It's not a religious group. No, it's for everyone, I guess.
It's black people who are being vegan.
No, but
you mean the African American population?
Yes.
That you're referring to.
Just the general, just across the board.
Again,
we also have a high vegan restaurant number of vegan restaurants per capita is also Michigan is on one of the top 10 lists.
Wow.
Yeah. So the point that I'm trying to bring over here is that while I was covering the story, I was speaking to a nutritionist who was saying, you know what? People can talk about going vegan, and in her opinion, going vegan is not that bad, but it's about what you consume in a vegan diet. So, for example, if you're having potato chips, that's vegan, but it's not healthy.
Right.
No.
Right. So you could be potato chips would constitute for being on a vegan diet,
right,
but you're just having totally garbage calories.
Right.
So essentially, Go ahead.
I was just going to say the big thing again, as we're talking about all these different aspects, is for me the big thing and the big takeaway that we're trying to connect and have as a theme through these episodes is whatever thing you're switching to, we still need to have a conversation about the biomarkers, and it's not just how you look, feel, and perform. Although that is kind of the three biggest things, because if you start performing less, your energy levels are waning over a period of time, and what happens is there's this kind of rookie effect of the first few months or weeks of switching to a better diet, like you're saying, from McDonald's standard American diet to a vegan diet that's cleaner, even if they're starting to include potato chips and things like that, there's going to be an effect. But the really big thing that I've noticed over multiple years of understanding, studying, seeing these people is there's a lot of deficiencies that build up. And the best thing to do here, and the folks that I've also met people who have been vegan for 25, 50 years, whatever, but they do blood work consistently. They know what to supplement with. They have to do a very good job of getting, again, pea protein or algae or all these different sources and understanding what's available to them. So there's this bigger picture that I just want to make sure.
That's rare, Bo.
I realize. But that's the thing. It's again, getting caught up in these trends where, again, we're going to come back to Game Changers. Game Changers not talking about that, that aspect of it. So people... And Faraz, I mean, let's go back to when you first saw Game Changers and we talked about it, and you mentioned this is a hot topic for me, and it gets me a little crazy. So when your first reaction is, or one of my like sister-in-laws, was like, hey, I saw this documentary, this Game Changers thing, and I'm thinking of switching to a plant-based diet. And I'm like, okay, what's the next step? So tell us a little bit about what you initially thought when you had seen it, and maybe a little bit more of that.
Yeah, so when I first saw Game Changers, and I think it's safe to say, like most people who saw Game Changers, they were pretty impressed. And it's a great piece of film. It's the way they tell the story and how we didn't. And sorry to jump in again, but we didn't really cue it up very well, because anyone who hasn't seen it, it's produced by James Cameron, one of the best filmmakers in the history of the filmmaking world. Titanic, Terminator, all these different amazing movies. Jackie Chan was involved. Arnold Schwarzenegger was involved in the production, and they were featured in parts of this. So again, without going too far down that rabbit hole, I just want to say again, it was an amazing piece of filmmaking. And I put documentary in quotes because that term documentary has its own kind of biases and things like that. So sorry, I'm going to throw it back to you. So let's put it, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because because visually it's so amazing to watch, and all the elements they throw in, the blood test and everything, and the foggy blood and the non-foggy blood and all that. So it's like, and
that was something Corona, the foggy blood was like, that was when I made him watch it a few weeks ago, and he got back to me. He's like, that foggy blood thing was really interesting.
I'll say this to you, Faraz, before you go into your point. I didn't look at it the way you did, but the foggy blood did make me take a step back to re-look at what I was seeing, to try to figure out what was going on. I'm suspect about a lot of things in fitness, but go ahead.
But see, if you put yourself in your shoes, in as an average person, who, like an average person around the world, it's safe to say that they're constantly looking to better their fitness or their health. Now, would they practically do it, or will they actually do it? That's a different question altogether. But in the back of the mind, subconscious level, I think everyone wants to get better in terms of looking good and being in good shape and whatnot. So when you see, videos like this, a film like this, you go like, wow, this has to be amazing. This has to be true. There has to be some truth in it, because they're giving you all these facts. For example, the foggy blood. And then you're looking at it and they're like, whoa, this is totally unbelievable. And look at this athlete. Look at this CrossFit guy. Look at this MMA guy. Look at this the strong man who's lifting X amount of weight and whatnot. And then, of course, they bring all this comparison between animals, like the strongest plant animal on the planet is the ox. And what does the ox eat? The ox eats grass. And so that's a fun thing. That's the one thing I asked Bo. I was like, hey, Bo, so, they talk about like the ox eating grass. What are your thoughts about that? And then and I guess this is where it's important to have that conversation. And his point was, go ahead, Bo, completely say your point.
So the thing I want to make sure, again, we're queuing this whole thing up, is when somebody is confident and they're presenting, as you call them, facts to you, which I would disagree with the fact that they're facts.
So facts for someone.
Sure.
They're facts for those individuals, I guess. Go ahead.
So when somebody presents something, they either do not understand the actual science or the process. Either they do not understand it, and there's real scientists who can say, hey, that's not how that works. Or they do understand it very clearly, and they are intentionally misleading, which I will accuse the filmmakers of Game Changers, because I've listened to a lot and I've seen a lot, and almost every single scene is presented, and this is the term we're throwing out, is pseudoscience.
Yes.
And so again, when a couple things, the big thing that you're talking about, Faraz, is like, yeah, look at this. There's this guy who ran, he ran whatever he did for over 42 days. He ran like 2 marathons every single day, and he did it on a plant-based diet. How is this possible? And what doesn't get talked about there is at the time, no one else had really done that, because no one thought to do this stupid freaking thing. But then after he did it, other people did it who were meat eaters. This guy who did it, who was a plant-based guy, did not recover very well. And he was like broken and probably like whatever. Broke down very significantly, because he didn't have the ability to rebuild because of the amino acids, if we really want to go into the science. But coming back to this whole thing is, they show again these examples of this one guy who was plant-based. and was able to succeed in this one very unique story. And it's great and it's interesting and again, watching it, I'm enthralled. I'm like, this is super interesting. But there's also the part of me that knows too much information, Dunning-Kruger effect, if you will, of, hey, when they're highlighting the strong man, they're somehow ignoring the fact that there's also, millions or 99.99999% of the other strong men are very significant carnivores. And the fact that this one guy was able to do it does not mean it's optimal. You brought up the South Asian culture or just population, right? And diet. And at the end of the day, and this is one of the other examples from the movie, the gladiators, right? And I've heard a few people bring this up as a rebuttal to Game Changers. They said gladiators were plant-based based on some bone dating and analysis and bop. Again, since that film has come out, even though when you watch it, you're like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And gladiators did have like a good physique and like maybe there's something to this. Again, it's so correlational and it's pulling from these crazy strings to even try to make the claim that plant-based was their preferred thing. No, plant-based was cheaper if they even ate that. Two, to your point about South Asian culture, meat is expensive to produce. So as a huge culture, I don't think that whether it's religious, whether it's going all the way back to saying like, why are we not eating meat? Is it because we think meat is less optimal, or is it that it's not as convenient?
No, but
why are Jewish? Go ahead.
I'll just correct you over there. For when it comes to South Asian, predominantly it's not about they can't afford meat. It's more about religious aspect of it.
Sure.
So there is certain religion which dominates in India, the Hindu religion. Hindus for the most part don't eat meat. I'm not saying all Hindus don't eat meat.
So real quick on that. So let's look at the Jewish faith because I have a little bit more, I'd say, familiarity with that. They chose to say swine or pigs or pork are specifically off limits.
Right.
And this has to do, when you look at the actual history of it, with the fact that they carried more diseases. So there was actually a rationale and a reason for why that was not at the time encouraged, right? So does that mean it's less optimal for me as a person living in the year 2022? What is that the year we're in? 21, 20? I don't even know what year we're in.
22, buddy.
2022. So is that say that I should never eat pork because it used to be a dirty thing and this is carried over from thousands of years ago? And again, I would challenge you almost to look back, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Hindu history of it, but did they come out and say, because again, it is very expensive to produce meat. And go ahead.
First of all, let's get back to Game Changers a little bit.
Yeah, because I feel like we're going into religion.
We're really going around. And by the way, Bo, just so you're talking to a Cuban, and pork is very big part of the Cuban diet. That's that. But I think the point
it's delicious.
It is. A Cuban sandwich, nothing like a Cuban sandwich, brother. But that being said, what we're basically pointing out, and I think we're all on the same page of this, there wasn't an abundance of people that were going vegan. There wasn't. There was one example for each individual sport is where we're talking about it, and they neglected the other side of the argument because they don't want to bring that part of the argument into the movie.
Right.
So for as you were saying before,
so I think because I know religion is a bit of a too sensitive topic, so I don't want to get into that because every religion has their own philosophy and thinking about what is allowed and what's not allowed. But if we keep that aside for a second and we just focus more on the culture aspect of it, you have to also understand every country's requirement. The diets are different based on their weather and how crops are grown. So what's available to them.
Right.
And I think for the most part, so I think if you're in a colder environment, I think meat and high fat content diet is one of the standard staple way of going about it. But coming back to this whole meat eating thing,
I want to throw in a very interesting one real quick is there's I can't think of the name of the tribe right now, but there is a population of like Eskimos that survive on 80% of their diet is whale blubber. And it's just pretty much pure fat. And because they're in that population, to your point, that is what they are eating. So but there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Yeah.
But just for Game Changer, for example, here's the thing. Is it possible the guys that were featured in Game Changers actually benefited from plant-based diet only because their body allowed them to? And the ones who tried plant-based diet, it didn't work for them because not because of the blanket statement, the plant-based diet doesn't work. It just didn't work for them.
Or they didn't want to do it, or it's too hard to be in a plant-based diet. I mean, there's a number of reasons that we can go down.
Let me jump in real quick with that. Even one of the people they highlighted, Kendrick Farris, he was the Olympic weightlifter in that film.
Yeah.
When he switched to plant-based, as he was getting a little bit older, they kind of highlight, and if you look at his career, he got much more injured after he switched to plant-based. And so they, again, are not highlighting that. He did have some like ability to progress and do better and get stronger, but that's going to happen with almost any person who continues to do their craft longer and longer. So he was an interesting story where he got kind of worse and worse at the end of the day. And his career ended right about the time they made that film. And after that film, he had to retire from the sport of Olympic weightlifting, even though he was featured in that as, again, a plant-based guy. I was a big fan of his. I followed his kind of career. And again, he was a guy that, again, I think when we really look at his career, he actually was significantly shortened. His career was shortened because of the plant-based. And again, maybe that's my bias, and I'm happy to admit that. But we also look at, they didn't talk about this in the film, but Cam Newton, anyone familiar with the NFL, he was a guy that, again, very popularly and very openly switched to a vegan diet to try to recover better. And he started getting injured more and more. And then he couldn't come back. And then I don't know when he did switch back or fourth or whatever. He only had one more year last year where he was, again, kind of mildly successful, however you want to look at it. But anyway, I did want to come back to the fact that, again, this comes back to that concept of either they're being purposefully deceptive or they don't fully understand and they're not willing to talk about the full picture of science. And to one last thing, sorry, again, I do get obviously excited about this. The conversation that I think we're missing, and Faraz, I feel like you're kind of getting to, is we're in an age now where we can actually have this awesome conversation of what is the optimal diet. I don't feel like Game Changers was being honest about, is this actually optimal, or are we going to highlight these very few rare examples that were able to succeed with the thing? The fact, again, the ox, you brought up the ox. The fact that the ox is able to take plants and turn that into muscle is phenomenal. But they have completely, there's a reason we don't have ox studies that then say, oh, like the ox did well on, I brought up like the Viagra thing, whatever the thing is, but they did really well on protein shakes or whatever. Like, yeah, they were able to get stronger. They're the strongest animal, but they have different stomachs. They have different digestive tract. Like the physiology is completely different. There's a reason they don't do that. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's very, very difficult in today's day and age. Before I give this back to Faraz, people get into their echo chambers. Simple. If you are a strong vegan, you're going to preach from the high heavens to be a vegan because more people are telling you that you're wrong. If you're a strong carnivore, you're going to do the exact same thing on the opposite ends of this. And there's people with different diets who will say to you, Atkins, oh, that's the best thing ever. I lost X number of pounds. Keto, that's the move. Whatever it might be, no matter what thing you're on, most people will champion that argument to get their point across. In this case, it's Game Changers. Game Changers is basically saying go plant-based. They're not going to go into the other side of the argument because the other side of the argument doesn't help them. And so I will go along the point of saying that it does stray you into a different area. It's not 100% on, right there with you and right on point. You know what I mean, for us?
I totally understand. But I've got a question for Bo and Corona. You could answer that as well. But before I do that, let me just highlight something really important. One is, I think, in my opinion, I think every diet, if you're looking to reach that optimal goal and you still haven't, then obviously something's not working out for you. And then I think people should try different things, whether it's cutting down on something or introducing something into their diet. And if plant-based diet is one way to experiment, I don't see a harm in it. I think give it a shot. See what's the worst that could happen. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Go back to what you were doing in the first place, right? Hold on. When I say what's the worst that could happen, I'm not saying keep doing it for like 5 years, right? Because here's the thing: any diet to kick in, you need 3 weeks for that to happen. And then, Bo, I've got a question for you coming to that point. Is when you were saying, let me rephrase that. When you were giving examples of athletes who did not perform well after being on a plant-based diet for certain months or years, whatever. How do we know that that was the only factor?
We don't by any means.
So to put that blanket statement that they did not perform because they were on a plant-based
again,
diet.
I said that's my own bias. I tried to say that, like, again, Kendrick Farris is an interesting example, but my point is they presented it as like he switched to plant-based and he got so much stronger and he got so much better, but they're ignoring the lack of kind of follow-up there.
But they did it on everybody, though, Bo. They did it with everybody, every single person.
Again, the endurance athletes, same thing. The Conor McGregor guy, again, I forgot the other guy's name.
Diaz. His last name is Diaz.
Nate Diaz, exactly. They did not, again, highlight the fact that they did. They pointed out the fact that Conor McGregor's over here eating steaks, and Nate Diaz beat him, and he was plant-based. Again, not mentioning the fact that he eats fish and eggs. And then they had a rematch, and Conor McGregor beat him on the rematch. So again, like, not putting that information in there, to me, is, again, intentionally deceptive. So that's the only thing I'll say on all that.
Did he beat him because he was a vegan?
See, but that's what I'm saying. It's hard to, it's not, you, like, first of all, I don't think anyone can prove that. Maybe not. Who knows? So, like, a couple of years ago, I did this intolerance test where, you know, you get to see, you know, what foods you're intolerant to, which causes you bloating, lethargic. You know.
I'm going to say real quick on that.
Yeah.
Is most of those types of tests are, again, from a scientific standpoint, not super valid, meaning that they, you know, they might be right, they might not be, just like some of these genetic tests that are happening. And again, if you go to 10 different companies doing the same kind of testing, you might get 10 different results. So I just want to throw that in there.
I get it. Agreed. And it all depends. But it's your journey. It's an individual's journey into reaching that fitness goal. It worked for me. I'm not saying it'll work.
Explain what worked for you, please.
And I'll tell you, of course. So when I did that intolerance test and I found out what food groups and types I was intolerant to, and I cut it down, I saw my energy levels shoot up. I saw my body go lean. And when I say lean, I'm not talking about losing muscle mass. I was super shredded at that point. I was stronger, faster, and definitely I was hitting PRs as well.
Right.
But it wasn't sustainable. Because, for example, most of my breakfast food was gone, like eggs and cheese and milk, all of that was gone. So, you know, literally for breakfast, I would have like cold turkey, you know, slices of turkey or salmon.
Delicious.
Yeah. and
let me jump in real quick on all that again. And this is to your point about, like, how do we know that Kendrick Farris switching to vegan was what actually did or did not help him? Again, there's so many confounding variables. You continents somewhere in there, right? Like, there was a lot of confounding variables and other factors that might have influenced that. So it is very difficult. And again, what you're talking about here is, yes, you might have reduced inflammation. And a lot of these tests, again, what they do is they highlight just very common things. It might not even be the antibodies that you did, depending on how much you spend, all that. So again, at the end of the day, and this is what I was trying to say to your point earlier is, yes, people, what's the harm in it? There isn't necessarily any harm in trying different things. However, the closer and more scientific we can be about all of the variables, right? That's the thing that I think is missing. And I've wanted to develop that app that can allow us to track, hey, you have these results and now you're going to make this big change. But what can we actually track? Is it blood work? Is it, again, how you look, how you feel, how you perform? Can we track these things, and over what period of time? And again, you're talking about switching to cold turkey, literally cold turkey, is you might have increased your protein intake, and that might have been the thing. And that's something that, again, I would say is very well evidence-based of, if you have more protein in your diet, most people undereat protein. And if you eat more protein, that might be the thing. And you're looking at it in a very different lens. And you're looking at, like, I had to remove these things and I had to focus on these things and it wasn't sustainable. But again, that's the conversation. And the big thing for me, the biggest takeaway for me with all these conversations, especially around nutrition, and as you can see, it's a very complicated thing, is, yes, I agree that we should be experimenting on ourselves. But if we do not understand what we are tracking and measuring, then we are missing a huge component to this. So if you're just switch to plant-based, like you said, some people feel better. Some people have better energy. You were hitting PRs. And again, was it not sustainable for whatever reason? It's easy to look at that correlation, but that is not science. And the more scientific we can get, and that's the challenge, and having somebody like me as a coach, as a nutrition expert to guide you on that journey, that's the part where it's like, it's worth the investment of however much. And again, like, here's my quick sales spiel to everybody. If you give me $3,000 over the next 6 months, I'm going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of your life. I can almost guarantee you, because I'm going to save you on, wasting time on trying the fad diet and wasting time on finding these different things. And a lot of, again, possible surgeries and injuries and time where you feel like shitty. So anyway, that's my quick sales spiel. And
is that Dunning? Is that Dunning and Krueger? Is that Dunning and Krueger, sir?
It's called Dunning-Kruger effect, not
I understand.
Krueger.
Is it Dunning-Kruger effect? Is that what you're doing?
Are you accusing me of being ignorant?
I'm
is that
joking.
What you're
No, I'm joking.
I know you're joking, but I want to just be clear.
I'm not calling you as ignorant.
Corona, if I may jump in real quick.
Go ahead.
I may jump in. Okay, so here's, let me ask you this, Bo. Let's say if I go on a plant-based diet tomorrow and my markers, according to you, are amazing. As per your standards, they're amazing. Would you become a plant-based become a plant-based individual?
Based on the one example of you improving your markers from a plant-based diet? No, exactly. That is not.
You shouldn't, because that's the point I'm trying to make, is that everyone's body is different.
Yes.
How my body function is completely different to yours. So I agree with you. Yes, you shouldn't follow me. If it works for me, it doesn't mean it'll follow for you. So and plus our goals are different. Like I like to have a washboard abs, right? And you don't. You think that's useless for the most part because it doesn't benefit you. Correct? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Sure.
And to get washboard abs, everything you gotta. It all depends on your diet. It does 100%. For the most part.
Right.
And so.
And again, I'll just throw out the real quick argument that in order to have what you're talking about, washboard abs, your actual body fat percentage has to be well below 10%, possibly
which is
even 8%.
Not healthy for the most
Exactly.
part.
It is not healthy and sustainable. Exactly.
100%. I agree with you. But at the same time, I think that's what the image the media has created. Is like, oh, if you want to look good, that's what looking good in definition means. Like, that's what you need to have. And I think everyone's chasing that for the most part, whether it's men or women in different aspects of it. And in that pursuit, I think people lose the true meaning of what does being healthy and fit mean. Because it certainly does not mean having washboard abs. That I agree with. And that's why I agree with Bo, is to get those tests done, to see what your glucose, your blood sugar levels are, to see what your what's the fat test that we have for cholesterol and for the triglycerides and everything, all those tests,
sure.
All those tests that those markers need to come back scientifically in a healthy range.
Well, but there's still a lot of disagreement in what even is healthy cholesterol, because there's studies that show that the people who live the longest actually have a cholesterol level closer to 260. But any general doctor, and again, I see your reaction there, Faraz, like, whoa, that's a little scary or whatever. But yeah, a lot of doctors, there's again some differences in what the research says and how we even interpret it. And as a quick aside, one of the big follow-ups after Game Changers came out, the big, of course, platform is the Joe Rogan Experience podcast situation, and the filmmaker from Game Changers, the main guy, I can't think of his name, the MMA guy, can't think of his name right now. But he went on with Chris Kresser, who's a big primal paleo kind of advocates for, let's eat a whole lot of plants and be plant-based, but also organ meats are one of the most nutritious, nutrient-dense foods in the world. So not including these things is probably going to be deleterious to your health if we don't figure out a way to supplement properly. But anyway, they had a full 4-hour debate back and forth. I want to say that guy's name was James something, but
he was very disingenuous.
Yeah, so I listened to the whole thing. It was a little infuriating. And so Chris Kresser came with like hundreds of resources and references. And anytime somebody does that doesn't necessarily mean they're correct, because you can cherry pick a lot of data, which is what I would think. I think, and I'm going to accuse again the filmmaker James
Cameron.
No,
Cameron.
No, the MMA guy. I can't think of his name. Maybe I'm off on James, but
it's Nate Diaz.
Nate Diaz was he was not the filmmaker. He was just the guy they featured in that thing. Anyway, it's all right. But the guy who was on, again, he and they got into this, and one of the quick examples is the interpretation of this concept of, and this is where we come back to the research and how we interpret research. And again, these guys are on a huge format, and he made a film, and in the film, Chris Kresser was calling him out on the fact that there was a study that came out that showed they were looking at dairy and its effects on cancer. And basically they showed that 60% in the middle had no effect. And then like 20, I'm oversimplifying the exact numbers, but 20% had an increase in cancer and 20% had a decrease in cancer. So the filmmaker took that to say, he added the 20 and the 60 and said 80% showed dairy increased cancer. So again, dairy is bad. And it was like, well, that's not how that works. You can't just include the 60% that had no effect. And like, that's what he was doing. And they got into it. And again, they yelled back and forth. And to anyone listening, like, again, this guy was very, again, convincing and confident. And
James Wilkes is the guy.
James Wilkes. Thank you for looking it up. Yes. James Wilkes. So James Wilkes was very, very, as he is an MMA fighter, and he teaches, militaries how to fight and things like that. He was a very dominant presence. And Chris Kresser, if you've ever heard him, he's very quiet and he's very passive and it's very, very, and he's just like, but the study says this. And he even said, like, I'm not even interested in really arguing right now. I'm just here with the data. And he's like, I knew this wasn't going to go very well. Anyway, but the point was that it did not go well. And again, there's many different interesting ways to interpret research. And again, when you start getting down to the nitty gritty and you get academics in the room who actually understand the research, that's where I come back to this big concept that people who are presenting kind of research, and I'd love to bring this back to the news and headlines and this Dunning-Kruger effect that we're talking about. People who present anything with a ton of confidence either don't really understand the science or they understand it and they're being deceptive a lot of the times.
Which brings us, Faraz, I'll give it to you in a second. But what's going to bring us to is because we're going to have to wrap this up. Faraz, go right ahead.
All right, two points that I want to make over there. One is it's safe to, and from what I've read, it's safe to say there are different types of meats out there now in this day and age which are not healthy. And we can go into organic meat and non-organic meat, or like how the meat was, how the cow or whatever animal was raised, and then the meat was derived from there, and that's a big thing, which also could lead to other ailments as well, depending on the type of meats you're consuming. And maybe that might be a different topic for another day, but just wanted to highlight that.
The quality of food is definitely its own huge topic. Yes.
That's another podcast for us.
But I wanted to throw that out there. So because I know we've been talking about meat eating, and then we also have to bring that topic. And that's also another thing to consider, that the quality of meat available these days is was very different to what it was back in the days. And that could be a trigger to most ailments as well, what we see these days. Also, another thing is, when it comes to, at least for people like us in news journalists who have to reach out to experts, another aspect that I didn't bring up last time is we also have to look at people who are good speakers. Mm-hmm. Majority of the time, scientists are not good talkers. Majority of the time. I'm not saying all of them.
For sure.
And I think what people fail to realize is when you're doing an interview for news, we are not, as a journalist, we are not looking for a monologue. And I think people go on into this rant. Like I just asked one question and I got like a 6-minute answer. I'm never going to use that. Honestly, right. I'm never going to use it. We are sort of designed, or our mind kind of works like looking for that 10-second answer. Right. Anything longer than that, we'll never use.
And I just want to jump in real quick because it's interesting you talk about that, because I had a recent guest on my other podcast, the Bono Stuff podcast, Jimmy McKay, and he just took a job. He's a physical therapist, but he also was a radio show host in his previous life. And so his job at Mount Sinai, where they do a ton of research, is to be a science communicator and to take all the 6-minute or 20-minute thing that the scientists would talk about and be like, okay, how am I going to take that and throw it into a news segment, into a 10-second kind of soundbite, being like, hey, we just discovered this thing that if you put it on your eyes, like it saves you 72, years of your life, whatever the thing is. But he found a way to do that, to make it accurate and not misleading, but also very digestible to the general public.
So just to add on to that point, so if Bo or Corona, you do see, or viewers watching the podcast right now, if you do see experts who you think are not credible enough, chances are A, they're already there in the media because they're good speakers, or B, they're just super confident. Going back to the first slide that you and Bo, Corona and Bo pointed out, and C, they're able to communicate the information better than experts. As simple as that. And so, if people watching this right now think they are expert in their own field, one thing I would recommend, if you want to get far ahead in the game of at least in news and in media, is be a better speaker. Try to get that information, that the thing that you're trying to communicate, in as shorter or duration as possible.
Also, do it in a dance with a TikTok. For the TikToks.
Sure, if that works too. And make it understandable in layman's term, because I think that's another thing that people forget.
Well, I think when it's all said and done, you and I talked about this before, you guys only got 30 seconds to get a story out sometimes, and it's not a lot of time, or 60 seconds to get your story out. We got to be more skeptical. The takeaways, I think, because we got to wind this down. Are we having a call or not, Bo? Is that happening or no?
I asked Farris. Scott hasn't come back on.
If it doesn't come back on, we'll just wind it up.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so basically the takeaways from this, we have to be more skeptical of people's claims, including what we said. You guys should check up on us and follow up with us. Bo, your takeaways from today.
Yeah, the biggest one is I think that we need a guide on the journey. And at the end of the day, Farris alluded to it, is you have your own journey, and it's worth experimenting with certain things. My big addition to that is the closer and more scientific you can make that, which again, most of us are not experts in science. So we don't know what markers to look at. We trust our doctor to say, oh, did my cholesterol go down? Which I think sometimes is the wrong way to look at it. Did X change? Did Y change? So the big thing for me is 100% play. If you want to play around with plant-based, and a lot of people came to me, and the reason we brought up Game Changers was a couple of years old, is it was a really fascinating cultural phenomenon where so many people came to me and were like, hey, I saw this thing. Should I switch to plant-based? I know, Bo, you know a lot about nutrition. Should I switch? Is this thing legit? And that's when I say, oh, let me send you this 60-minute video of me breaking down all the things wrong with it. But at the same time, the really simple answer is, yeah, that was, again, I call it a vegan propaganda piece. I think that's what it was. Again, we can go into the financial incentives that were there. And James Cameron's wife is the primary founder of a pea protein company, and, all these things. Without getting conspiracy theory on it, my big takeaway again is everyone should experiment on themselves. And if you feel you have the knowledge to do that, again, check in with the Dunning-Kruger effect. But if you're willing to invest the money, if you have the resources, again, seek out somebody who understands. And again, we did our episode of Demand Better from your nutritionist. So yes. Is a registered dietitian the best person to help you with that? I would still say not always, because they are best equipped to deal with medical issues, diagnoses. They might be the best person to go to in that situation. But in terms of experimenting with a plant-based diet and understanding which blood markers should we be monitoring, or experimenting with a carnivore diet, and again, which markers should we be monitoring? We should be avoiding, oh, Joe Rogan did that for 30 days and he was fine, so I'm going to do that. Those are the things like we talked about, the cult of personality, the echo chambers, all these things. Expand the concept, expand the conversation. Coming back to, who are your gurus? Who are your people you listen to? Do you have people you can trust and ask questions? I know Faraz always sends me a question. He sent me a bunch yesterday. That's fine. But it's finding those experts that we can kind of connect with, that you trust, and things like that. So it looks like we're not going to have our caller.
We're not going to hold it. Let's see, Faraz, what would you give the listener before they leave?
The one takeaway, or let's put it this way, a couple of takeaways from my side is going to be, obviously listen to your body, experiment on your own things that can potentially work for you or can't, and you won't know that until you try it. Obviously, don't go down a rabbit hole, which would be hard for you to come out. And I do agree with Bo that, listen to the science and listen to the markers to test if they're actually working for you or not. That's one. Two, credible sources. I can't say that enough. If you're following an influencer or a TikTok superstar on their fitness journey and thinking if it works for them, it's going to work for you, no. Chances are probably not. And there's just so many different factors to them. Their age, their race, their gender, and so on.
Socioeconomic access, all that.
Absolutely, everything. And then also, things that they're doing in their fitness journey. So, for example, if they're doing CrossFit and you're just into, jiu-jitsu, two different types of workouts altogether. Similar intensities, but different workouts. So that's why it's important to sort of follow or seek out advice from experts who are in the same field and get that knowledge.
And another really big variable, real quick, is training age. And so I just did a thing about knees over toes guy, and he shows how he got over 7 knee surgeries, and now he can dunk a basketball. But he had been playing basketball his whole life. So again, somebody who's 30 years old and has knee pain with a torn meniscus, and they're looking for a solution. Again, some of the stuff he talks about is great, and I love it. But he's showing pictures of him dunking and making the expectation when you watch his social media that, hey, you can dunk a basketball too, just like me. And it's not realistic because you don't have 20-something years of training your basketball muscles. Yeah.
And you, Bo, are not 6 feet. So you'll never be able.
Sorry, tall guy, Corona. I believe I'm taller than you by at least an inch.
So with that, go ahead, Faraz, finish it up.
So, and then the last thing I also wanted to say, and if for some reason you're not seeing the results that you're hoping to achieve, then do seek that medical attention, because there could be a possibility that something is going on in your body that cannot be addressed by diet or fitness alone, and you need medical intervention. And this is, it might be for a little bit more specific category. Like, for example, I did a story on a 63-year-old lady who went through a weight loss surgery, and she did not, by all means am I saying that that's what everyone should be doing, but she had to do it because it was absolutely necessary for her. So the point I'm trying to bring, and now she's done, I think, about 13 marathons. So like that's where she went from. She was like about 312 pounds and now is 125 pounds. But she still stresses on a healthy diet, watching her calorie intake and whatnot. And I think that's the key where most of the surgeons highlighted, the ones who operated on her, is like, we just provided her a tool and she used that tool the right way, which is constantly monitoring her diet, even after going through surgery. And to this date, she's fixated on her diet, monitors her calories in and out and whatnot, and getting the right amount of protein and vegetables and whatnot. So bottom line, what I'm trying to say is experiment as much as you can, follow the right people, seek the right advice, and if it's not working, then obviously reach out to get that medical attention that you deserve.
Well, real quick on the 2 things on that. The disclaimer that we always hear is, before you start a new exercise or diet regimen,
see a doctor.
See your doctor. So you're saying check it after, when you've already maybe done some damage. I'm trying to say that's where I said invest with someone like me up front, and I think that's going to save you a lot of time, energy, stress in the long run. So
that's ideal, but how many people actually do go down that road?
Well, we're going to have to do another podcast, guys, to tell you about this.
And then the last piece I'll say about that surgery you're talking about, Faraz, is unfortunately, the statistics show that a majority of those surgeries do fail. And it's great that you can highlight, again, like Game Changers, one of these success stories, but a significant majority of them fail because most people do not and are not ready to do the work that you're talking about, that she's maintained this lifestyle.
Correct.
And again, it is just a tool and they're not doing the thing. So anyway, let's wrap it up. Corona.
I've been trying, but we guys got so much good information. First of all, Faraz, thanks for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And guys, seriously, when you're out there, be skeptical of people's claims. Do your research and demand better for everything out there. Make sure, if you don't know what it is, come to the Demand Better podcast, look up what you're looking for, and we will be your consumer's guide or report to do what's best for you. Have a great day and demand better, guys. Later.
Bye-bye.